Okay.
Yes, indeed.
I just want to first start off by thanking everybody for coming to the event tonight. It's definitely a pleasure to be hosting a panel for IAIA, Independent Association of Illinois Attorneys. And for those who are not familiar with the group, it's a group of small firm and solo practitioners. It's kind of a knowledge share, so we have an email that goes out. If you have any questions regarding a certain area of law that's probably not typically part of your area, or if it is within your area that you're just not too sure about, we definitely send an email out and get responses within minutes. Everybody is really willing and happy to share. And there's also referrals that go out too. So I'd like to welcome our four panelists today. They're speaking on blockchain and cryptocurrency. Very distinguished panel. We're very pleased to have them today. I first want to introduce Zach Ziliak. He is a former financial engineer at UBS and a head trader at a proprietary trading group. He designed and implemented automated trading strategies prior to law school and currently works as an expert witness on cases involving spoofing and market manipulation. He leads a team of a dozen attorneys at Ziliak Law Firm with a focus on trading companies such as hedge funds and mutual funds, business corporate work such as fundraising, M&A, and blockchain issues such as ICOs, crypto funds, etc. So we also have Andrew Gordon, who is a cryptocurrency tax lawyer and managing attorney of Gordon Law Group. He's a graduate of the Chicago College of Law. Andrew is also a certified public accountant with a master's degree from University of Illinois. During his law school, Andrew clerked at the IRS, our favorite friend, of course. He at the IRS Office of Chief Counsel and conducted a tax fraud trial for the IRS. At Gordon Law Group, Andrew concentrates on tax controversy compliance, including representing clients in state and IRS audits, tax court and tax controversies. His familiarity with IRS audits and what can go wrong provides real-life experience to crypto tax compliance. Andrew has been representing clients in crypto since 2013, before the IRS deemed crypto property. In areas such as tax return preparation, tax planning, entity formation, and general crypto law. Andrew is a self-described crypto nerd and stays on top of new IRS regulations and guidance to best serve his clients. He's been rated a rising star from Super Lawyers for 3 years in a row. Michael Goldberg currently practices estate planning and estate administration in Northbrook. He started cryptocurrency as a hobbyist, miner, and investor, but is now integrating cryptocurrency into his practice. He is cautiously optimistic that cryptocurrency is poised to grow and everyone will need to have plans in place to hand off their cryptocurrency assets to the beneficiaries. Michael has recently published in the Illinois Bar Journal for his article, Estate Planning for Cryptocurrency Assets. Yankun Guo is a solo practitioner focusing her practice on corporate compliance and financial regulations. She represents small startup technology companies and investment funds. Prior to starting her own practice, she worked at CME Group in their Transactions and Commercial Relations Group and Corporate Compliance team. She is also regulatory counsel for a fintech company here in Chicago. So we have a very distinguished group here. We're very excited to hear what they have to say. And we're going to start off today with Zach. He's going to give us kind of a basic introductory to blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Wow, so how long would you like me to just jabber on a bit here? Just
as long as you feel necessary.
But next to the crypto nerd, I'm not going to try to say very much. But so picture it's a decade ago, and a lot of people were frustrated with having to move money around inefficiently. So maybe you want to buy a small quantity of goods from another country, and you're converting your currency over. And if you're trading a small amount, you did ask what you want. Transaction costs for changing currencies was huge. Or you just, so then there were also libertarians who said, why should the government know what I'm doing with my money and so on? Plus, just nowadays everything's electronic. Why can't I just sort of email someone my money? So now we have Zelle and all the rest. That's great, but they weren't there, and so you could wire money, but the cost for that was pretty high too. So what if we could just sort of have a pool here where you have the money over here, I have the money over here, we all sort of agree on how much is there, and if I put in and transfer it over you, you can take it out over there, and it all happens electronically, and we'll just keep track, which is great, but there are all kinds of technical hurdles there with people stealing your money or paying the same money twice to people. So it was sort of a dream until people figured out how to do this, and now we have Bitcoin, which is that idea that you can track who owns this alternative currency, this virtual currency, and how much is in your wallet or someone else, you can move this around. Now once it started out small, grew, a bunch of people made a ton of money on this. I don't know where we'll go with this. Let's see. Yeah, there's so many different areas. So let's see. I should have prepared this part rather than just all the answers to the other stuff. Let's see. So, I totally lost my train of thought back here. You want to take this over?
Sure.
Go right ahead. I'll follow you later.
Well, we can tag team.
Yes, okay, I'll jump in.
Bitcoin is the first example of using blockchain. So blockchain is an underlying technology. And it's, in fancy terms, what it accomplished is a distributed ledger, which is a record-keeping system that wasn't just centralized, it wasn't just held by a bank, it wasn't just held by a government, it was distributed across computers everywhere. And that's essentially what a blockchain is. It's a way that you can keep track of things in a decentralized manner. The creator of cryptocurrency created this, as Zach was saying, years ago, right after the collapse of the real estate market, and then also a lot of issues with banking, and a lot of distrust in banking institutions and governments as well. And so he designed a system whereby if I sent Zach money, we don't need a bank to sit in the middle and say, all right, I'm going to decrease Andrew's account and increase Zach's account. Instead, we're going to create a decentralized way where there's not one person, but everyone that's going to confirm this and say that Andrew paid money, Zach received money. And Bitcoin was the first example or proof of work of how blockchain is supposed to work. And the blockchain, Bitcoin, has never been hacked. Meaning that this decentralized system, no one's been able to corrupt it and sit in the middle and say, no, Andrew still has the same amount of money, but Zach also has $5 as well. That's never happened in the Bitcoin blockchain. So that's kind of how the blockchain and Bitcoin works.
Can you talk about how it's kind of impossible to counterfeit Bitcoin? About how there's a ledger that kind of tracks every movement that the Bitcoin makes.
So maybe I could describe mining a little bit, and that may help just to jump to another topic, not to overcomplicate things. So I talked about this distributed ledger, decentralized, these fancy words. It basically means a lot of computers all over the world that are confirming the same transaction, and they get rewarded for confirming it. And what they're confirming is basically that the code that I provided to send those funds to Zach was in fact the right code. And in order for it to be agreed upon, or the fancy word consensus reached, the majority, at least 51% of the computers, need to agree that the code that I provided was the proper code. Once consensus is reached, then a payout is paid to the miners for doing those computational tasks, and then it is written on the blockchain forever. It is so the first trades that ever occurred of Bitcoin, there's a history of that. The second trade, everything that's occurred with Bitcoin, there's a running ledger of that. And it becomes printed or finalized on the ledger once the miners reach this 51% consensus. And that hasn't been hacked. In theory, if someone controlled 51%, they could manipulate the blockchain, but that's never happened.
And Michael, you have experience with mining. Do you want to talk about?
I do. So if anybody's familiar with mining, Bitcoin is now completely mined by ASIC miners. So they're computers that the only purpose of them is to mine Bitcoin, so they're efficient for that purpose. So you couldn't set up your home computer. You could, but you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get anywhere. It's going to be a small drop in the bucket. But there are thousands of other coins that you can still mine with the home computer that have some value. So you can make money doing it. It is currently profitable. Who knows how long? The issues are, your upfront costs for getting the computers, the length of time before you're paid back for that, and just general profitability of the coins you're mining. And there's also, for anybody who's environmentally conscious, it's not great for the environment. And I think a lot of people justify, and I do myself, that I believe so much in the idea behind it that I'm willing to for a short period of time look the other way while it's promoted, and then with the hope that mining will be done away with soon, and we'll move to these other systems of holding. So there are other ways that you can set the system up besides mining that produces the same results. There's a proof of stake, delegated proof of stake, proof of importance, so people can hold these coins and make money from them without actually having to set a computer to utilize energy and mine it. So a lot of opportunities, and it's my hope that the environmental impact is short-lived.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a lot of information, so if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to raise your hands. And this is meant to be a casual discussion.
Yeah,
So.
can you?
Yes.
I feel like the Senate asking Zuckerberg questions. So who's paying the miners? Is it just a cost built into transactions, or if you're setting up a system of, well, I'll just leave it there.
It depends on the particular coin. I think Bitcoin is distributed on a formula, which I don't know the exact formula of how it's distributed. There are other coins that are distributed based on just how much you have. So like a flat 4%, you get a 4% return for the coins you're holding per year. There's some that you vote for a delegate, and the delegate aggregates all their holdings and then distributes among people who voted for that delegate. So there are different ways, but Bitcoin, I think, if anybody else wants to speak to that, I believe it's based on a predetermined formula. At a certain point, it runs out or it just decreases substantially.
So to kind of add on to that, Bitcoin has operated in the sense that since it is an open ledger, everyone is participating onto this. So everyone gets to mine, everyone has access to this open ledger. And so the more you mine, the incentive to having people use their CPOs and to mine this is the more you mine, if you mine a certain amount, you get a big, that's sort of the incentive behind it. So that's how the mining process kind of got started.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because my knowledge isn't as versus you, but I think what happens is the miners all have this huge computer system network set up, and every 10 minutes, they try to track all the transactions that happen between all the Bitcoins. And the computers all compete to solve a certain equation to track all those transactions. And whoever is able to solve that equation gets rewarded with the Bitcoins.
So that part kind of adds on to why Bitcoin or blockchain in general is really secure. When I think of blockchain, I think of it in two components. One is putting data onto a block. So every time you add to the data, a unique set of code or a hash is created. And then when you string these blocks together, you securely string it in a blockchain that goes through cryptography, which makes it very, very secure. So unless you have this such set formula, you can't break or you can't unlock this kind of key, and that's what makes it such a secure system.
So let's move on to...
Could I ask another question about mining before we move on? So I have kind of a two-part question here. So one is, with respect to blockchain purposes not related to currency, is the notion of mining necessary? And then I guess the other part is, I'm curious about, you talked about the alternatives to mining, and I'd be curious about some more detail on how that would work.
So mining is not necessary. I think it was set up initially as like just something as a hurdle that you need to pass before you can get rewarded for it. But a lot of the programs, a lot of the coins, you just need to be running a node on the system verifying transactions, and you get rewarded. So mining is absolutely not required for a lot of these. You can have a blockchain without it. But I think it was initially set up just to not just give everybody Bitcoin automatically.
Okay.
I think it's important to also recognize why mining exists, and that's to create consensus. So we talked about answering complex cryptographic equations, but really it's to achieve consensus. And so there are other means that other blockchain or other cryptocurrencies and other blockchain projects have used to obtain that proof of stake, proof of work, and so forth. Just mining is a means to do that. It's a way to distribute whether or not something should be finalized onto a blockchain across many different computers, but it's not the only way.
So you would need to achieve consensus whether you're trading currency or executing a smart contract, for instance.
Well,
there would need to be a consensus mechanism.
Right, and
whether it's
so
mining or
historically,
something else.
you've got the governments, you have banks, you have escrow services, title companies that sit in the middle and act in that regard. And so we need a way without a specific intermediary to do that. And so mining is one of the ways to do that.
Okay.
Is there a limit on the number of people that can be verifying a transaction at any given time at Bitcoin? So can you have 1 million people verifying the same, or is it limited as soon as you have 50,000 people verifying this, then no other people can verify that particular transaction?
Bitcoin, it's my understanding it's unlimited unless there's some sort of software program limitation, but it's my understanding it's unlimited. It's just each new person that comes in dilutes the pool, so then you're less likely to get rewarded with Bitcoin. If your computer's less likely to solve the puzzle to get rewarded with Bitcoin. It's going to be somebody else's problem.
So the reward is diminishing based on the number of people that are in the pool of people doing it.
It's a set number of Bitcoins too. I think it's 21 million. It's 21 million Bitcoins that are in circulation, and that's the end of it. Once all of those are circulated.
Yesterday was a historic day. Yesterday was Bitcoin number 17 million that was mined. So yes, there's only a total of 21 million that will be released. So it's based on scarcity. It becomes more difficult to mine. So more people can enter, but it'll become more and more difficult to mine as there's less that's released. And there's ultimately only going to be 21 million.
Who decided that?
Satoshi Nakamoto, my cousin.
He's a mystery man. Nobody knows who he is.
So, in terms of mining, if everything is so accurately followed and verified, why are there these coins that are subject to being mined? Like, why are they standalone, sort of available to be mined? How is that possible, number one? And number two, as many of you know, I'm an immigration practitioner, and one of my clients actually is working on a Bitcoin, or is it Bitcoin or cryptocurrency exchange? And apparently there's like a hierarchy of exchanges, some are better than others, and he's tried to explain it to me many times as to what makes one exchange better than the other. I think I'm smart, but I don't get it. So maybe you guys can explain what makes an exchange good versus one that you wouldn't want to trade on. So 2 questions.
I think I can address the exchange piece. So, in theory, different exchanges might trade different products, and if they trade the same product, they might have more or less liquidity. It's a network effect like anything else. If you're the first person in town to get a new cell phone, a new type of phone, and can only communicate with other people with the same phone, you don't have to be only by that kind in town. You want to have a kind of phone that you communicate with others. Similarly, if you go to an exchange, the first person there, it's just crickets. How do you trade with anyone? So it's just, but once there's a certain volume, there are enough market makers there offering to buy and sell the various cryptocurrencies, it makes sense to go there. Now, there are also reasons why some are better than others based on perceived security of the exchanges, jurisdictional rules, that matter prices, all sorts of things. And again, I talked about different products. So one of the issues right now is which tokens. So we've talked about how there are multiple cryptocurrencies out there. Lots of companies issue their own tokens, brand new cryptocurrency they use to raise money, whether it stands for the right to use their system in the future once it's all up and running, or a percentage share of the company, whatever it is. They create a new type of token. There are lots of cryptocurrencies out there. And some of them might count as securities, which means you have whole extra regulations in the US. So there's a whole issue about trading future derivatives on it, which brings the CFTC in. For this reason, a lot of these exchanges, most of them, are based outside the US to avoid these US restrictions, or they trade just plain old spot cryptocurrency, not derivatives on. They try to say, you cannot trade your currency here without listed if you are a security. So they vary by the depth of the market, the volume that's traded there, so how tight the market is. They vary by what they trade. They vary by the perceived security and jurisdictional issues. Other differences you would think of?
Yeah, one thing I'll add is that I noticed in the last year, and I think a lot of people are noticing, that there are know your customer and anti-money laundering laws that are now being applied to these exchanges. So now they're asking for a lot of information, like give us your passport, a copy of your passport, your driver's license. And I think that turns off a lot of people, especially in this space who are generally more libertarian, who don't want government involvement. They don't want to give their driver's license to an unknown company existing somewhere else. So some exchanges still don't require that. So that's probably a big factor in how a person determines which one they're going to use.
Just real quick. So if I live in the United States and I hold accounts overseas or I do work overseas, I'm subject to certain IRS laws. You're talking about certain exchanges that are based outside the United States, obviously it's geared towards you. Are there any IRS regulations in place at this point for the use, the holding, and purchase of Bitcoin or other exchanges overseas?
Yeah, I guess I'll answer that in a couple different ways. First, regardless of where the trading is conducted, as a U.S. person, you're taxed on your worldwide income. So it doesn't matter where the exchange is located. If it's California or Bermuda, you're still taxed in the same way. But in addition to that, there's also reporting requirements if you hold foreign assets or foreign bank accounts.
Right.
The FBAR is the most commonly known one. And while there isn't explicit guidance that the IRS has said that an exchange is classified as a foreign bank account, it looks and smells like a foreign bank account. So our advice here is that it should be included on FBAR and also on the other forms called FATCA, which is very similar to an FBAR. So even too, if you had a safe deposit box and you held cryptocurrency in that safe deposit box and that was in Switzerland, you would have reporting requirements then too. So FBARs as well as income on your tax return is required.
Do you think the IRS is going to have safe haven laws related to, as Bitcoin becomes more popular, other exchanges become more popular, more people invest in them, do you think they're going to have safe haven laws that say, hey, you know what, fess up to what you have and we'll penalize you in that sort of way like they did recently, in the last decade or so with other foreign accounts?
Sure, it's a good question, and I don't think so. Because, well, one, there has been guidance out since 2014, pretty clear guidance, and a lot of people think the IRS hasn't ruled on certain things, hasn't issued guidance. It's really just a misconception. A lot of the answers are out there. It's been addressed in previous rulings related to other technologies or other things, and it just now has to be applied to crypto. So, for example, trading crypto for another crypto, Bitcoin to Ethereum, for example. People fight about it all the time, whether or not it should be taxable, but according to the code, it's pretty clear that it should be taxable. It's property, you're going from one thing to another, and it's not classified as a like-kind exchange. If you had shares of Apple and shares of IBM, sold one, bought the other, that's not a like-kind exchange. So, while we're analogizing the stocks and other things, that is our role as lawyers, and that's the way the law works, is that we're often doing that. So a lot of the code already exists. Now, there have been voluntary disclosure programs that the IRS has had, and these have been mainly offshore types for people that had foreign assets, foreign accounts, that generally either didn't know they had to disclose or knew, and they're willful, and now disclosing. The IRS is actually closing those programs. The formal OVDP program that was announced last month is going to close September 28th. And so a lot of that is really just closing anyways. And so now to say they're going to release something new in the area of crypto, I just don't think it's going to happen. What I instead think is going to happen is increased enforcement, more audits, as well as more disclosures to the IRS from even foreign exchanges. Foreign bank accounts, decades ago, people would have thought, no way Switzerland would disclose bank account information to the IRS. It's happening. Banks across the world are doing it. So I think exchanges are going to be the same way.
Do any of you have opinions about what the best exchange to transact on is? It's not an exchange.
I think like the internet consensus, I'm not sure how I would gauge that, but I think there's one based in Hong Kong called Binance that people really seem to like because it's based in Hong Kong and it's not on the same pressure that Coinbase or Gemini based in the United States might have. I personally like Gemini. If anybody knows the Winklevoss twins, they own it. There's some insurance on the platform. They're based in the United States. Your money probably won't disappear overnight. So I like that, but it's a very limited exchange.
Which cryptos can you trade on Gemini?
Ethereum, Bitcoin, and Litecoin. I think only so.
And I think that's the problem with a lot of exchanges is, for example, Binance, you can't go from a US bank to Binance and buy crypto, right? So you have to usually start with another exchange. You have to start with Gemini or Coinbase, which is the most popular, buy there, and then transfer in to somewhere like Binance. Because the US exchanges only generally deal in Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash.
So how is the value set then? If you want to buy a Bitcoin, how much is it worth? And who's setting that?
It's not a central thing. It's just like,
It's not centralized.
I mean, it's just like buying stock. What is everyone willing to buy? Was it paid? Was
If you're buying
everyone?
stock, it's based on a dollar. It's supposed to be a share of stock for $10.
Well, why is it $10 rather than 9 or 11? I mean, I shouldn't be totally equated with stock, because at least with stock, you look at a discounted cash flow analysis, there's something out there you know what you're getting a share of. But I mean, it just comes down to supply and demand like other products. What do people think it's worth? If enough people say it's worth
So
more,
when you buy one share of Apple, you buy a share in the company.
yes.
So
Right,
that's getting set by because Apple's got so much money to spend and their numbers are up and come on.
So it goes back to the point about scarcity and just the perceived value of this, what they're using for. So it depends on cryptocurrency, right? Some of these tokens, some of these ICO tokens, initial coin offering tokens, in theory, you anticipate being able to use services. That you're going to exchange this token for some service in the future, or perhaps it's a share of the company or whatever else. And then there is a way to at least theoretically value that. A lot of others are just a gold rush. Get it now, things are about to look at want to buy it, buy it ahead of people, then sell it without ever really thinking what it's worth.
The very first Bitcoin ever, number one. So yesterday was 1700. The first one. How do I set its value? Like I won Bitcoin. Okay. How much? Like based to your point, like how do I just say I have $10? Looks like $10 or 11. Like, how do you even?
It starts that way. Someone said $10, and then no one bought it, and then it dropped down to 9. It's supply and demand. The first Bitcoins were kind of given away to people, like literally just kind of handed out to people. The creator of Ethereum was recently interviewed by Vice, and he talks about how he was paid in Bitcoin years ago as a teenager, and he was getting like $2 an hour equivalent of Bitcoin, but he was just getting this magic internet money and was collecting Bitcoin. So there's really no set price, it's supply and demand, and initially there was nothing, pennies, or nothing at all because no one wanted it.
And then I did ask a question before about how mining came about in terms of everything is so efficient, everything is accounted for, but apparently you can mine for these Bitcoins. So where are these mines and why are there mines in existence?
The name is a misnomer. It's not like there's a big pile of Bitcoins out there people are trying to...
Because literally that's what I'm thinking.
Very few people started to talk about it before, but it's more solving problems, reaching consensus, and you are paid for providing a service to the whole blockchain, in this case, Bitcoin blockchain community. You help solve these problems, you help reach consensus, and how the ether materialize, bing, your next Bitcoin. So this is one that had not been issued yet, rather than like it's sitting over there and really doing that yet.
So I was only slightly up.
Okay.
Doesn't the for mining, doesn't it it diminishes, right? Like the value, like over time, because it's going to take more computing power. There's going to be less Bitcoin available. So eventually, we'll have to reach a point where it won't be worth it for people to actually mine, and then let the system just be done.
Because the computer system is very elaborate, right? And it takes a lot of.
Well, they keep developing more and more efficient computers, ASIC miners, that their only purpose is to mine. So they've so far
But isn't that a problem though? Because once they get more efficient, then they start making the problems harder.
That's true.
Because they can make it more difficult.
Yeah.
And therefore, it seems like you're going to run into a problem where it costs too much electricity.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern, and so far they've been able to stay ahead of it. As you know, more and more people want Bitcoin, the price has gone up, and so it's still worthwhile to mine. But what you're suggesting is if the price actually stops at a certain point, then it'll no longer make sense to mine, and people won't mine it. And that doesn't mean that Bitcoin will plummet in price, but there might just not be any more. There might be a cutoff where maybe we only hit 19 million.
Well, something like it goes by half every year or whatever it is, and at a certain point, it'll be all mined out, right? So then, how does the system go forward once, whatever is 2100, when that's all done? Do you have to, is it going to start using like an Ethereum system where you have to provide money for the transaction for the miners?
That's just on Bitcoin. So only Bitcoin has a cap of 3 million. So there's other alternative coins. But I mean, that kind of goes back to the heart of the issue in terms of the regulatory perspective, right? What are these coins when they're being mined out actually should be? Are they currency? Are they stored value like a commodity, as the CFTC has called it? Or going back to the valuation, how do you value this? This is why the SEC has come out and said that every ICO should be treated as like a security offering, and you should be following security regulation rules when you're dealing with offerings.
But the difference though is really, it's not just a currency though, it's like a half currency, half commodity, right? And so that's what I'm trying to figure out in Bitcoin. It's not like a stock, because the stock is just the currency part. But really you're developing like a pipeline, and that's what the mining component is. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, where is the real value in that? It's really it's just a public database is what it is, right? That everyone can depend on. So if I want to start storing information there, we're going to use it to parse the entire blockchain to show that that's real. And so that's the real utility of it. The other part is the currency, which is kind of as everyone's saying, completely phony. Because who knows how much it's worth? A penny or right? I don't know, do you have thoughts on that? I know enough to be dangerous, but I really don't understand.
I thought you couldn't do that on Bitcoin. I thought you could do that on Ethereum, but not on Bitcoin. That it doesn't. Bitcoin's only a currency, but Ethereum, you can run other applications.
Well, I thought there was information stored in Bitcoin. For example, Illinois did a pilot program where they did the titles, right? And so they're using coins. I don't really understand colored coins and how that works, but they did use the technology, and they said it was because it was the most it had the longest run, so Bitcoin is the most trusted. So how did they, right? They use it as a database, right? How did they use I don't understand how they use it. You guys know that?
Bitcoin's probably not the fastest transaction time. They probably use one of the other systems like Ethereum or something, where going back to consensus, there's different levels of consensus, which adds to a different level of cryptography at that point. Instead of having everyone consent, you're writing different rules and having partial consensus, majority and such. But Bitcoin's not the most.
But I don't think they're using it for the speed of transactions. I think they're doing it because every time you add a block, there's another block. And as in a database, you can just store information. I think you can actually write messages like, hey, hi mom or something, and that'll be in the blockchain forever. I think that's how they're using it. So it's not so much as how fast you go, but do you guys know more about how they store data and how they use data in blocks?
Yes, you can definitely send some data like this in the blocks, and as we're saying, not as much as Ethereum, where there's a whole return complete that are programs and such. But the device can be sent with a block. But yes, so yes, you're right. It's a distributed database, distributed ledger, that you can piggyback off of, which just your high-volume kind of messages. I wasn't familiar with the Illinois program, but sure. I guess I understand.
My guess, John, is that they were using just blockchain technology in general rather than Bitcoin specifically. Because
no, they use Bitcoin, and that's what wasn't really clear. That's what's one thing that's really. I know we always look at it as a currency part, but all these other people now are using it as that Bitcoin specifically not as a currency, but as a way to make transactions, really just to store things in a public record. It's not so much that you're moving money. It's almost like they would pay a penny just to have this in a law that was incorruptible law. And so that's how they use it. I'm not sure how they use it, what they're doing, but it seems like they're just adding information as a database. They would parse the entire blockchain to only find the ones that are relevant to the Illinois title, and that would show the true title rather than having somebody corrupt a ledger with all the titles. You wouldn't know if someone hacked it or whatever. I mean, that's what I'm trying to figure out the difference between it is a currency and then it is a technology that's actually used for something. Like a dollar, you can't do anything with a dollar, but you can do something with a blockchain.
I was going to say what you described is exactly the underlying technology behind Bitcoin, which is blockchain. So every time you add a piece of data onto your block, you get a unique hash, and when you create multiple hashes and you chain it together, you create what's called a blockchain. So that when you're talking about like a verification system like mortgage, or Chicago recently is doing a pilot program, I think, for CityKey, which is an identification program. You're supposed to, for CityKey, which I know a little better, you're supposed to be able to look into like a scan program, you put your fingerprint or put your information in, it goes and verifies back then, which using the unique chain of block and hashes to make sure you are who you say you are. You're actually a resident of Chicago, you are a citizen here, and then it will spit it back, and then it will tell you, yes, this person is eligible for all the city of Chicago technologies. So I think what you're describing is more blockchain related versus just the Bitcoin aspect, but they're a little bit intertwined.
As it relates to the city of Chicago, how will they be able to corrupt blockchain?
It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, right.
So if you have Bitcoin, have you guys considered risk management issues? So if you have Bitcoin, what happens if your computer crashes or you lose access to your code?
So,
what do you do? How do you get your money?
So this has been a concern of mine because I do estate planning and estate administration. So my big worry is that someone holding like $1 million in Bitcoin is going to pass away, and then their family member is going to have to find it and then send it to other people. And what happens if they make a mistake and lose that money because they're scammed or something along those lines? I mean, I'd like to see insurance products out there, maybe like escrow services where fiduciaries can be protected because it's going to be a significant issue. It already is. People already send money to wrong addresses. They get hacked. They get phished. All sorts of things that happen where they are parted with their money and then they complain about the system, and that's valid because there's no centralized person to go to request a refund. If you make a mistake, it might be there for good. I mean, Ethereum actually had a large, I think, theft last year, and so the Ethereum Alliance did decide to fork it and create a new line going forward to return the money. But that's a rare event, and that probably won't happen for some deceased person's estate. They wouldn't do it for that. This was like, I don't know, like $500 million or something. So it's a big concern. It hasn't been addressed, but I'd like to see insurance products for it.
Have you seen an insurance policy for it?
But I've seen groups in the city of Chicago that are making their own products for it, that are looking to launch it. So there's a lot of innovation in the space, and I hope to see it soon. It would be a great thing to offer.
So each of you have dealt with this in different areas of law, and I think it's probably important to talk about how all of this information kind of translates to the legal aspects, and maybe you can touch upon how you've dealt with it in your own professions. We'll start with Yankee.
Sure. So I advise small startup companies. A lot of them are now looking at launching ICOs. Since July of 2017 last year.
Can you explain ICO?
Oh, sure. Initial coin offering. So it's when a company creates their own unique token to basically try to fundraise. So the SEC has seen it now as being equivalent as doing a security offering, because at the end of the day, very few companies have been able to successfully do what's called a utility offering, which is saying that the coin that they're offering is only meant for like a functional process, but not for raising money. here testified before the Senate committee, saying that he's not seeing a successful ICO out there. But people have been using this as a vehicle of doing fast fundraising and sort of getting away from the traditional VC funding and other types of seed funding, since it was not as regulated until last year. But now there's been sort of like a slew of enforcement actions by the ICO trying to halt a lot of startup companies from producing ICOs and just not registering with the SEC and not being able to register an exemption with the ICC through a different regulatory. So that's sort of the area I see. I also now see, as we talk about Bitcoin prices and a lot of these currency prices drop down. It's dropped down a lot since January of this year, but a lot more institutional money has come in. So now I have a crypto fund client, and I have a lot more small fund, family and friend fund clients coming into play this year. And a lot of trading firms are now more and more comfortable being able to trade this as a new class of assets. For them, when we're talking about the valuation and the value of these coins and tokens, for them, with the price drop, they've been now be able to dive into, be able to do more due diligence and understand the product behind these companies offering a coin offering, and they'll be able to better value and place it, and there's more and more institutional money going into it. So that's kind of the
I don't want to forget. So you mentioned ICO.
Yes.
So my client is at a stage where they're pre-ICO. They're launching, I believe, June 15th. They approached me as an investor. They think I'm rich. Anyway, that's a joke. But my question is, do you guys have access to investors that I can put in touch with, that would want to, for example, invest in this pre-ICO stage, and how risky of a proposition is it? And this is not only a question for you, but other ones.
I'll just quickly address that, and I'll segue to someone else on that. But I don't think anyone here probably has investors, but we probably have the right attorneys that they should talk to make sure that their ICO is being structured appropriately. My personal view, and you guys can back me or disagree, is that 95, maybe 99% of the ICOs out there are violating the securities laws. And so instead, they should probably take a step back and see, are they structuring this appropriately? Should it even be an ICO? Because the vast majority of the ICOs out there, they're using ICOs, as Queen said, as a means to raise money in a sexy fashion, but the reality is they don't need an ICO. They're really just using it as a vehicle. And so I would probably suggest talking to Zach or Kuhn about whether or not ICOs are even appropriate.
I have another ICO related question, and this, maybe there's something that I'm missing entirely, but I don't really understand the concept of an ICO, that you go out and create a new cryptocurrency to trade money in. And maybe it would be helpful, and regardless of these securities issues, those aside from it, could you maybe describe what in a successful picture, what this would look like from an investor standpoint? Because even then, you buy an ICO of a company who turns out to be successful. At the end of the day, it would seem that you still have a non-tradable financial asset, but I feel like I'm missing something.
So, let's imagine there are no regulations.
Yes.
So that's a whole issue about what is legal and stuff.
Yeah.
I suppose you can just do this, all right? The company that issues the token can say what that token means. It might mean this represents 1 millionth of the value of our company. If we eventually liquidate, we get 1 millionth of the liquidation value, just like a share of stock. It could be that. It could be we eventually will provide this kind of service. If you want to use it, you eventually have to put Bitcoin my token in to get access to this. So if it's just like for a little while after regulation crowdfunding came out and interstate crowdfunding, there was a lot of pre-sale crowdfunding where people were saying, what I'm selling is the stuff that I will eventually deliver to you. Give me the money now. I'll use your money to build the thing that then I can give you. So you actually, you have an IOU. When you buy this token, you can later, finally you built it, now I can go buy this service. And so you can place a value on it by knowing it will eventually be worth what that service is worth to you. So something like that. Sometimes these tokens are, you just have to have one to get a membership. Now you're now you're an in-group, and you can use the ecosystem for all kinds of things. A lot of this, though, is then just people saying, what's the hot thing, what can I buy, and it's like later on selling someone else because they're going to. But at the end of the day, just like your Apple example, you're getting a share of the company. Similarly here, in theory, you hope the group that issues this is saying this is what you actually get for the token. Now that said, I mean, going back to this point about how these are not quite as great as they seem to be. So, like I also work in the ICOs. We've had clients come to us looking to launch an ICO, and yes, we try to be on the right side of the law, do Regulation A and various things to make sure that we satisfy the securities laws. Some people come to us after their ICO. We've seen some strange things out there. And in some of those cases, people go, wait, this carries nothing. If you buy this token, the token they sold, they raised $1.5 million on this. And you read their white paper, you realize it doesn't get you access to the ecosystem. You can't use it on their system once it's turned on. It doesn't give you a share of the company and have voting rights. There is nothing. It was totally, I don't want to say it was a pyramid scheme, because there's no even pyramid. It was just, hey, if I buy this, I also buy it from you. And that works too. If you just have enough social influencers saying, yeah, this is a good coin. So it's a variety of things.
One quick comment on that. I was at a meetup a month or so ago, and most tokens are built on Ethereum technology called ERC20. And at this meetup, someone created a token, I forget what they called it, started distributing it to people in the audience.
During the meetup?
During the meetup. And it was even on, by the end of the meetup, it was on the websites that scan the Ethereum system, and it was a true coin on the system that could be, well, there wasn't an active market for it, but you could send it. And that just scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
That someone could create a token that quickly, start distributing it out of thin air.
You describe the history of it. So it sounds like the difference between a new cryptocurrency and then a coin or token, right? Can you describe it a little bit? You said that the token was built off Ethereum. It sounds like if you have a new cryptocurrency, you need to have a bunch of miners right away, right?
You need a technology. You need the underlying blockchain, right? The blockchain still, or even some of the newer ones don't have the same thing as a blockchain, but you need some sort of system, some ledger. And so a lot of them use the Ethereum ledger. I think it still remains to be the most popular. And so it's just using that technology we're not going to create a new Windows operating system. We're just going to use their framework, their architecture, and on top of it, we're going to create our coin.
What are the limits of this technology? In other words, can it be applied in any other capacity that I may not be able to fathom right now, but maybe in the future will hold it?
Yeah, one thing that I've been thinking about, because I do occasionally real estate transactions, I'm sure a lot of you do, is the application to deed recording and title insurance. So the system we have right now is very expensive to do a real estate transaction. It takes a long time, but I think a blockchain could actually make it very fast and very inexpensive to exchange real estate. So instead of needing to go to a title insurance company, you can have insurance on the blockchain that issues it. You can have escrow holding on the blockchain, so you don't need the title insurance company to hold any funds. All the money can be moved to the escrow immediately rather than waiting for a wire, and then record on a blockchain. So the state or the country can have a real estate blockchain that just records everything forever. And so I think that's just an example that can really be applied to any sort of record-keeping system or any sort of system where we transfer. It can make it much more efficient, cost-efficient, and faster.
So to your point, part of the resistance to this technology can be explained by the fact that many people stand to lose money and jobs along the way, because if you get rid of several middle people, there's going to be resistance.
Yeah, I think that's partly it, but on the flip side, I think that the government may have a hard time regulating some aspects of it, which means that some people may be more likely to get hurt, and there might be no remedy available for a person who's hurt through this technology. So I think I'm not a libertarian myself, but I think that there are benefits, but there are also costs, and this can be very dangerous too in that sense.
If the value is so arbitrary, people have to buy into the set of value into a real estate transaction. When you're buying a house, you are buying a house based on a value, based on the market is setting because of $1 that's setting the value. So
you don't have to use
cryptocurrencies. How is the transaction going to happen if there's 10 different cryptocurrencies that are done across?
You don't have to use the currency to have the blockchain, so you can do all the transactions on a blockchain without it. So you would just need a computer framework set up, among government or private individuals, however you want it set up, just to record and keep this blockchain active and up to date. But you don't need tokens, so you can still operate in US dollars if you wanted to.
So it's like a cloud?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's decentralized. It's computers, and that's how it works right now with miners. I mean, I could be running a miner in my basement, like little computers that are verifying the blockchain. Maybe. And then, they're all over the world. So, if some go down, they're still operating everywhere. It's really hard to take the system offline or corrupt it.
So I mean,
Go ahead, please.
So I mean, I've seen a couple, the best use case examples I've seen for using blockchain or any sort of tokenized system is one, if you have a unique good or item, right? So let's say you have a unique bottle of wine or antique and you are passing down title. The reason why blockchain technology is so popular now is because there is no way to be able to crack or hack that unique hash associated with your unique item, so that it's cryptography basically. So you know that whoever's transferring it to you, you can verify through other people who all have access to this ledger that this is the unique bottle of wine you're transferring. Even if they give you a fake bottle, for all intent purposes to the rest of the world, they give you that unique bottle worth this amount of dollars, and now that title has passed down to you. So that's one successful application of blockchain technology I see. The other, going along with that line is supply chain management. So one of the other, companies that I'm trying to work with is the supply chain management for food safety. Especially in countries like China or somewhere else where there's a big chain of custody with people touching different aspects of food. If you have everyone put their information in this open database and you know exactly how this database is tracked and that it's not hackable, it's not breakable, you know exactly that at the end of the day where your food comes from. And then going back to that sort of Chicago City key example is doing identity verification system. But when you talk about what are the limitations of why is everyone not jumping on board, you're using this technology that requires sort of verification through many, many sources. So let's say I want to verify my identity through the Chicago City Clerk. It takes someone else at the end of it to say, yes, this is Yang Kun, she is born on this day, she is a citizen, she is a resident of Chicago. And there's a sort of like a lag time of transaction before it gets back to whoever is requesting that information to say, yes, we all verified this is who she says she is, and we've used this now chain of custody to make sure no one else intercepted it. So there's a huge lag time, and it could take
How long is that?
It depends on how big the system is, So that's sort of the problem. The bigger, the more complex, the more people who join the system, it could be very, very long. If it's just like the group of us here doing verification within this room, it could be 30 seconds, 10 minutes. But if you add like 1 million people, and you have now 1 million people requesting verification for something, the lag time is enormous. So one of the questions a lot of developers always ask is, why would we prefer to use blockchain technology versus a traditional database source, which can probably do and replace a lot of the different blockchain companies out there. Blockchain is just sort of that fancy term that catches all investors' eyes at the moment. So a lot of it honestly doesn't quite require blockchain, but I think with time, people will, same with ICOs, they'll be able to distill which are the companies with real value and a good product and service, and that can actually utilize this technology, and a lot of them will go there.
Does anybody have like a resource or anything that
we could use to kind of learn more about this? Because I feel like there's like a big space missing that I just don't understand, like putting everything together. Is there something you guys went
I'll
to or
send out
looked
a
to?
link. I have a couple. I personally, I have a bunch of links that I can send you with a lot of information that the Treasury is using right now to base their regulations on. So I can send that out.
You guys are awesome. I just wanted to say that.
And I just wanted to say, for all the great things about it and the anonymity associated with it, it's a great thing, but it also can be the downfall of it, because as you said, if I own a lot of Bitcoin and I lose access to those numbers, or somehow if I die, my family they don't know I have Bitcoin, how, there's not a safety net. So if you put money in a bank, it's insured in the bank, and if you have securities, there's a recording of who owns those securities. But if you have Bitcoin, you and your computer are the only two places that have that knowledge. And if you lose access to your computer and you haven't backed up your numbers or your data, you lose your Bitcoin. So I think that's one of the things that's the area of law that I'm associated with is, what's the risk management of this ownership?
Yeah, and it's going to make a lot of attorneys' lives more difficult too, especially if you're in family law or bankruptcy. I mean, I used to work for a bankruptcy trustee, and bankruptcy trustee is tasked with finding assets of people and then selling those assets. Now, if this asset is made like a certain cryptocurrency that is made not to be traced or discovered, then how in the world would a bankruptcy trustee sitting in their office in Chicago ever find it? They would never find it. So, you'd have to look back maybe many years to see the money moving around in certain ways. It'd be really impossible to discover. And same with family law. If you were trying to discover ex-spouse's assets, they're holding it in this sort of thing. Like, how would you do that? I don't know that it's possible at this point.
And in insurance law,
Avoid creditors or not pay your spouse out.
It's possible to do that. I don't recommend it, but that's.
I'm saying, you've got big problem if you're trying to find your spouse's assets.
It's huge problem. Yeah.
but there's just as many scenarios of where you want to be able to show you have assets in Bitcoin, and there's been a loss from an insurance standpoint. You can't show the insurance company. You can't get any proof that you have this Bitcoin. If your computers are destroyed in a fire, you didn't back them up, or someone hacks your computer and you don't have access to that computer anymore.
Yeah, a lot of possibility for just complete loss, and I think that turns off a lot of people who are in it early who have been scammed. They may never go back into the ecosystem because they had a bad experience right off the bat.
So if somebody hacks the computer, can they get access to your Bitcoin, or they don't know that there is Bitcoin in there?
They'd have to know. So it's a password. It's called a seed, and it's just a string of words or many different varieties. But if they got that somehow, they can do that. But a more common one actually is when you're trying to transfer Bitcoin, they might replace the address you're transferring it to. So
If it's wire fraud.
Yeah, just like wire fraud, and then you send it to somebody else's address. You're never going to find that person who has your Bitcoin now.
With respect to the ICOs and the need for them to follow the SEC regulations, like, at least in the US, people know any examples of particular ICOs, like, with regard to the alternative currencies that are coming out, say with the Bitcoins, Litecoins, and Ethereum, where they've violated some of those and they've been kind of like shown out of the cryptocurrency space for that reason. Like, for me, one of the most reputable roadmaps was the I think it was the Aeron, where it was like a roadmap based on a 2-year timeline of all the utilizations and functionality of what this coin was going to do for aviation and all things related to aviation. But with regard to securities regulations, have I seen any alts that come in the space and violated those?
I know one. I think it's called Tezos or something along those lines, and it was like in France. And I believe that was taken down for that reason, but I don't know the specifics. I mean, it's still out there because it's hard to shut down like an entire system like that. But I believe it was right as they were trying to do an ICO, they got busted.
So the regulatory SEC functions are on it, like they're going to protect consumers.
it's like you're driving on the highway and you can pull over speeding, and they're, oh, look at her, look at him, what are they doing, right? They're catching a few, so munching. Now, some of these things come out and they say, that's not right, roll that back, you're violating the rule. But again, 95%. For every bat you see, there's not everybody out there yet, right? I think people are trying now to shift toward, some people are trying to shift toward compliant issuances, but a lot of others say, hey, people will give me money if I do this, and nobody's catching me yet, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Also, regardless of SEC violations, I think there's a whole lot of outright fraud and manipulation.
And that's what I'm working on. But it's good, it seems like regulators are trying. IRS, they're putting up the tax code, SEC. So
I think the IRS is going to be a big one in the coming years because it hits people more on an individual level, and just the everyday person, as people start to use crypto more and invest more in crypto, and as the prices go up and we have these internet millionaires all of a sudden, I think we're going to see more IRS enforcement. And I was talking to some people before as well. The U.S. exchanges are reporting a lot of the information to the IRS anyways. So I think the IRS is going to be amongst the most aggressive in going after the
I think in terms of consumer protection, the CFTC is out there. They regulate the derivatives aspect as well as market manipulation and fraud. So for people who are trading cryptocurrencies intraday, they're the ones who are on top of the business with fraud and manipulations. There's been a lot of Ponzi schemes or people disappearing off. That's under the CFTC's purview.
CFTC stands for
Commodities Futures.
no, I'm an innovation.
A damn good one.
Thank you.
You guys want to talk about smart contracts? Did we touch upon that already? So in how blockchain or cryptocurrency affects contract law, there's smart contracts, which I think Kuhn and Zach can discuss a little bit about, and after that we'll probably
Smart contract is just a blockchain-based string of what if and then codes. It's basically a long code of executions and commands that create something at the end. I hesitate to ever use the word contracts in front of like a legal attorney because it's really not quite a contract in our traditional sense. It's just a long, unique code that tells you if this happens, then if X happens, then Y will happen, and then if Z happens, then A will happen, and it creates something at the end. One of the most bizarre usages of smart contracts is something called CryptoKitties. You guys should all Google that after this. But it's one of the best case scenarios of using smart contracts, which is just a chain of code that creates something. And this is literally, it looks like a Pokemon or like a Tamagotchi thing, but people are trading this as like a good and value, and there's a whole secondary market of people spending money on cryptocurrencies. But I mean, I think of smart contracts just sort of as like what if commands.
Which is handy in my area. So, I mean, I'm thinking of the example of supply chain. And real estate, in a sense, is a special case of supply chains. You're tracking any ownership through A owns it, through B owns it, and C owns it. And that is one of the main applications that I see beyond the whole cryptocurrency thing, just for blockchain technology. A lot of companies can improve their internal logistics through blockchain. But another main application of it is in the whole financial industry. That's where I work typically. All these kinds of transactions, we already have ideas like swaps, where I will read the Wall Street Journal what this interest rate is and what this one is, and I will pay you the difference. This minus this, you pay me this minus this, the other way around, and so on. We just agree up front. I want to hold this, but I can't. You want to hold this, you can't. We'll act like we hold the opposite one, we'll pay each other the dividends or whatever else. You can have these same kind of transactions translated into these smart contracts. If this observable data goes above this, we'll automatically move this much money from this account to this account. So you can trade these up front instead of having this trust issue with a long contract where the money has to live, how much margin has to be held someplace to make sure you will actually deliver. It's just if it's written in there, Now you buy it and it just automatically happens. So I think there was a lot of room for blockchain defining the financial space. That's why we work with a lot of, you mentioned, trading companies, exchanges, and broker-dealers. We're trying to have broker-dealer type groups in this. Bitcoin ATMs back in the day, and there was lots about that recently, but we've never done about that. But financing is another area, yes, but finance is another area that is the explosion of blockchain applications.
So, going back to like the currency aspect of it, so let's say you own some Bitcoin that was valued, you know, whatever, $100, and then at the end of the year, it's now valued $150. So you sort of made $50. So is it like to IRS, for IRS reporting, like do you then pay tax on that $50 or whatever value difference is? Or how does that work in terms of like what's your responsibility?
So I would think of it like shares of stock.
Right.
And that buying it and holding it isn't a taxable event, but when you sell it, then it is. So when you sell it, or more commonly in crypto, convert it either to a physical good. Back in the day when it was to the moon, people were buying Lamborghinis, and that was taxable. You use your Bitcoin to buy a car, that's still taxable. Or if you go from Bitcoin to another currency, that's the same as selling. In any of these cases, it's the same as selling the Bitcoin first for cash, and then using that cash to buy either the secondary currency or the product. So just holding it, appreciation value is not taxable. It's only when you sell or exchange.
What about the smart contracts? If there's a transaction that happens, is that taxable?
Unless there's income, generally it's not taxable. It's a complex question. Just using a smart contract does not create a tax liability. Now, whatever's within the smart contract itself may.
Smart contract doesn't necessarily equate to transaction selling or buying. It can be used for literally anything.
Are they financial transactions though, or is it just, what is the if then, what are some of the if then examples that happen?
I think Zach gave a great example, sort of like, you know, if you think of it like, I like to use escrow as sort of an example. So if I transfer you X amount of apples, once it's delivered, you give me like Y amount of money. And it's all sort of like pre-written out in this line of code. So when this transaction happens, we don't have to call a third person to make that swap of money. It's going to just automatically get delivered into my account. In an ideal scenario, using smart contracts properly.
So you could use it as a system where you're delivering apples while I'm going to deliver eggs. To like avoid, being some sort of, because it's not money, right? So then in that situation, it's not a taxable event.
If the question is using the smart contract as a means to execute a barter, does that change the barter from being taxable? And no. I mean, whatever the underlying transaction of the smart contract is, just because you're using a smart contract, it doesn't change anything. We're swapping Lamborghinis for gold, or apples for bananas, or whatever it may be. Whatever the tax implications are, even though we're using a smart contract, it doesn't change anything.
But I think it's a good example of what is generating a lot of excitement in the whole blockchain space. A lot of people are thinking, I'm going to do this thing that has been done for a century, but because I call it a token, none of those will apply. People think, I'm going to sell shares of my company. I'm not selling a document certificate, I'm giving you a token. That's not subject to the securities laws, forget it. Or, we have this barter, but that's not really happening. It's all this virtual world, so we don't have to pay those taxes. There is a whole feeling, there is a community that says, oh, well, that's just old stuff, don't write those laws, and people are just, like, I mean, I have people reaching out to me to invest in, like you're saying, reach out to you, willy-nilly on LinkedIn, then you invest in their companies, invest in their ICOs. And I say, well, first of all, I can't, but secondly, you probably ought to do this, this, and this. And the response is, well, you just don't understand blockchain, you don't understand ICO.
You need to stop ignoring my emails.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, that general feeling of isn't this different because it's digital? I think a lot of people think that, oh, this is year zero, nothing matters for now. Really, a lot of these draw the analogy, it's just a different implementation, the same kind of transactions. We figured out the taxes on, the securities laws on, the real estate laws on, the everything else on. Just it's mediated through a different, medium.
So one of the issues about smart contracts, it would seem like with smart contracts, you are setting up all the conditions in advance. What happens when the conditions, either the contract hasn't been coded properly or everybody agrees on it and there's an intended outcome, but there's a mistake along the way and it's like, well, we agreed on it and even though this isn't the circumstance that we envisioned, it was a smart contract and everybody had the benefit of going into this with both eyes open, which you don't really have now in the way the contracts operate. How does that play out?
Keep this up with your point about where you're going.
No, I think you're totally right about not using contract in front of a room full of
I was
attorneys.
gonna say that's gonna be one of the fascinating issues I will be looking out closely for because it's exactly what you said. It's preconditioned, so that's one of the key issues, which is it's preconditioned and someone's not happy with the outcome. Can you use sort of traditional contract law saying there was a meeting of the minds with the way we coded this what if statements all the way up and down, and maybe eliminate that in the future because it's already preconditioned. It should be maybe like an easy case, shut case in the future.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting issues with this as well is jurisdiction. Depending on where the nodes are all housed, I guess, it could have a lot of different jurisdictional bodies potentially touching each transaction, which I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's a very interesting.
Yeah, and one of the other ones too is like, what if you have an immaterial breach? Like you have a real estate contract, but then at the end there's a set, like a 1 foot setback violation, nothing or whatever. Derail a real estate contract, but all of a sudden blockchain says, oh well, title can't be transferred, so
I think you'd want to code the smart contract in a way that if all parties agree on a certain outcome, you can just implement the outcome. So if there is something like that where it's like, but we agreed this is fine, then everybody can just agree and have it. So there might be some sort of trigger in that sense.
Yeah.
So would I hire someone that specifically works in the area of smart contracts to do this for me? And are they an attorney or are they an engineer? Or what?
Oh, developers.
I think they should be an attorney and a computer programmer.
And is that a thing? I guess that's a thing, but is that a thing? Like, are people actually doing that and marketing themselves as that?
I think companies are establishing teams right now, mainly, that are really attorneys and coders are sitting next to each other, doing it together.
And speaking different languages and probably doing a shit job. Yeah.
Legally synchrony.
Right.
I've seen law firms try to hire developers to just help them translate the line of code for a smart contract into English. So I've seen that might happen more and more now.
Okay, any more questions? I'm gonna wrap it up here and
1,000 more questions.
anything else you guys want to comment on or wrap up for? Okay. Well, I just want to thank these amazing panelists for all the wealth of information they've provided our group, and for everybody that joined us, and for Ellen for suggesting that we do this. I think I've persuaded Andrew and Yankun to join the group too, so they're always available for more questions via our email serve. So if there's anything else, I think we're going to wrap up. There's the appetizers and then Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.